Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp and Hillary White to once again jump into the 28 Years Later universe with a review of Nia DaCosta's 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. It feels like just yesterday we were on the podcast discussing Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later from last year, and today we're so excited to get into the sequel. The film is split in half between two stories, one following Spike as he is forced to join the Jimmies, and one as Dr. Ian discovers that maybe there is more to the virus and a potential cure than one might have originally thought. Today we discuss both these sides of the film in complete spoilers, so just know if you've not already seen the film, this is going to be a spoiler discussion. Also be aware that this is going to be an audio only episode. We were having some issues recording, so it just happened to be just audio, but that is completely okay. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast this week. Without further ado, let's get to our review of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Hello, Jack and Hillary. Thank you so much for joining me today to discuss 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, a spoiler discussion. So if you've not seen the film, be warned, this is going to be spoiler filled. It feels like it was just yesterday. We were talking about 28 Years Later. Kind of rare for a franchise and a series to come out so close together, less than a year between the first film and the second film. Nia DaCosta stepping up as director for this one. I know we all had very strong reactions to this first film. Jack, you especially, I know, had a very, very strong reaction. I've not seen your review. I'm blind to what really both of you think, to be honest. I'll turn over first, though. Hillary, I'll turn it to you first, then I'll go in, and then we can let Jack, who I know, again, deep connection to the series. We'll save that for last. Hillary, what are your opening thoughts on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple?
Well, first of all, I want to echo what you just said, which is I'm glad that we're all back together. And it does seem like it did, like you said, it feels like it just happened a few weeks ago or something, but that's not the case. My experience with this, I'm sure we'll get more into it, is very similar to the first one. I feel like there are two different storylines, two different movies in one movie, and there's one that I like more than the other. But overall, I'd say my reaction to the movie is positive. And I would tell people to see it, but it's not like it's meeting soaring heights or like it blew my mind or anything.
I'm going to echo a lot of what I said about the first film. I do like this film a lot. I actually like this film, I'll be honest, better than the first film just by a smudge, though I'm a pretty big just Nia DaCosta fan in general. Pretty brutal. I mean, I would say if you're going into this and you don't know what you're getting yourself into, it's a very gruesome, violent, brutal experience that is not fun really in any way. It's pretty over and over and over again reinforcing just how dark this world has gone. But at the same time, I think it trades in the first film a really, really powerful coming of age story and look at the concept of age and maturity and the line between childhood and adulthood. This film trades that for, in my opinion, a really good conversation on religion, the power of religion, how in chaos religion forms and can inspire groups. I thought there was a lot here that worked for me. I like that this film goes into some absurdist territory, but I think like DaCosta handles it very well. So for my opening thoughts, I'm definitely a fan of this. Again, I would actually say I'm probably more positive on a first viewing on this than I was the original film. But definitely I would echo a lot of my thoughts, and I'm pretty much with you, Hillary, in a lot of ways. But Sir Jack, here's the question. What did you think of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple?
I feel like this is going to be slightly anticlimactic because I adore the first film. I mean, I have like visceral memories from the original, the 28 Days Later. And then I wanted to, how do I explain this? This has been my most anticipated film of this year, and it was 14 days into the year. The hype has been unreal. It was everything leading up to this was perfect. That the critical mass, the scores, the first 15 minutes, I couldn't believe I was actually watching it. Like Hillary and like you said, it feels like this recording, like for the previous one, was like 15 minutes ago. I can't believe I'm in the cinema watching this. I've had nightmares about the first film. The 28 Years Later since last June. I've sort of gone into this thinking like, oh, here we go. I did not love this film, but I liked it. And nothing disappointed me in this at all. There was like a lot of surprises, a lot of fun. But there's some stuff or pieces here that's missing from Danny Boyle's work that works really well in Nia DaCosta's film, and there's other pieces in Nia DaCosta's film that works really well that's not in Danny Boyle's film. And I think it's very difficult to see this as a trilogy now, because I find that this is over and done with. I don't really see what's next, and I think going into this, I don't know how you two felt, but it felt somewhat anticlimactic. I think if this is it, and I know the third is being greenlit, I'm happy with this, but I'm sort of equally as frustrated with the whole thing. It's just very strange, this film. I'll leave it like that because there's a lot to go into in specifics. But the anticipation I had was like so hotly, greatly anticipated. And the first 20 minutes, like I said, I could not believe I was in the cinema watching this. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't wait. I've been hyped to watch this. And it did deliver, and there's some really crazy moments. But I feel like these two back to back feel like like its own entity, and it's done now. And I like that because it's solid. But there's still something missing here, and I'm still chewing the fat because I've only watched it from this morning. My theatre wasn't very busy, but I did go watch it at 9:20 this morning. So I'm interested to get into specifics. But I really love the first film and this new trilogy. But this was really good, but I didn't love this. So I'll move it back onto you, Carson, because there's going to be a lot to talk about, I'm sure, here.
No, I love it. And I do think there's a worthy conversation here in talking about this as a trilogy, considering I think the first film, a lot of my issues stem from the story elements, feeling like this is setting up a world that, okay, I assume in the next film we're going to get into, and then the third film is going to build to this giant payoff. And it still probably is building to that to some degree. But I definitely agree that I thought as a follow-up for the first film, it kind of, and this is not to like slander the film at all, but it kind of has an issue of like almost the newest Star Wars trilogy, and not to trigger anyone at home especially, but like in the sense of it's a film that demands, and it's very like J.J. Abrams, right, where it's like it opens a lot of questions. It starts to introduce these characters, and you don't really know what are the Jimmies, what is this world. You're introduced to it in that first film, and you expect that payoff, and this film goes into directions with, I would say, all elements that you really wouldn't anticipate, where I think if you were really hyped on what the first film was offering and you had a very clear image of what you wanted those to be, I'm not sure if this pays off in the same way that I think a lot of people were frustrated with Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, because how it answered those questions maybe did not meet expectations, or it went in a different direction. But I think probably the best place is really first carving this film into two, because it is, as Hillary mentioned, two stories. You have the story of Spike, who's joined the Jimmies pretty forcibly as they go around the countryside, really just terrorizing people in the name of Saint Nick. And then on the other side of this, you have Dr. Ian, who has started to experiment with Samson, the alpha infected of the area, giving him drugs and maybe starting to see, is there something deeper to this infection? I think it's probably helpful first if we talk about these elements individual before we bring them together. So why don't we start first with Spike and the Jimmies? I know especially, Jack, I'd love to hear your perspective, considering what this is referencing in culture is a very British thing. It's not something I have a lot of reference to. I'll say from my point of view, I thought this was effective as far as just being gruesome. It's a violent, gruesome group that's uncomfortable to be around. But I don't know if this side of the film necessarily found the depth or found the purpose that I was really hoping it would in that first film, especially because that first film introduces them with such, they're fighting and it's like this like cartoon almost with the sound effects and such. All that kind of gets stripped away here. I'm curious, I guess I'll turn it back to you, Jack, and then Hillary, if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. How did the Jimmy storyline work for you as someone who has more connection to what this is referencing?
I would echo your thoughts entirely. I think that there's the two parts. I think that the second part, with which we'll get onto later, I think that has more than meat and bones to it. I agree with you. I think this is a slither compared to its previous exploit. I think that this is a lot more minute in how it wants to go around things, considering that Jack O'Connell's Jimmy opened the predecessor and was sort of this third party throughout that film and bookended it. I was surprised that this didn't open with more backstory as him as a child to give it more depth, because then there's a meeting later on where there's sort of this open up of a character who's quite grisly and grotesque. There's somewhat humanity found there. And I think the lack of that insight into granted, I think the opening of the first film's terrific, but I think it needed a little bit more meat here to see how that person's developed through these 28 years. And I think the fact that when we get to see this, the power to this film is that this just starts. There is no build up. There's nothing. We go straight into this, and I think for a lot of people, that's going to be both a negative and a positive. First and foremost, I think this is a feature that's incredibly quick in pacing. Incredibly, I could not believe they were in the third act already when I was watching this. I couldn't believe how quick it was. I remember checking my watch and I was like, had 10 minutes left. I went, what? I could not believe how quick this is. So that it's relentless, and I don't think you spend enough time with them. I think you're right. I think primarily because I think that arc's already been done before in a saturated manner on the genre. I think that we've seen this before where someone goes to a group or not even an apocalyptic group, but we've just seen someone lose the bearings, go see some horrible stuff. I can't really get out there, fall into the bad gang. And I think the demonstration of that, I've heard multiple reports that this has been trimmed down significantly. I've heard that barn sequence that's notorious now is like 10, 15 seconds longer in other places. And I think you've got to be careful of it just being torture porn, because there's a certain different type of genre here in this new, let's say, like you said, Carson trilogy. I think there's a lot more nuance. I think there's a lot more like exploration of the actual setting. I think even more so than what even Romero tried to do, which is like the on the cusp of like talking about capitalism. This very much is talking about the about healthcare. We'll get into that a little bit later. The first one's definitely about Brexit. This is ultimately about healthcare. I think it's interesting. I think Jack O'Connell is electric. I think a lot of the secondary Jimmies as well are really interesting. You don't get to know them, which I felt like, again, to your your Star Wars reference, it feels a lot like the Knights of Ren, but a lot more engaging, because with them, rather than the just iconography in Star Wars, where these people, there's generally sort of this brokenness and darkness about, and especially that opening sequence where we have to see this horrible bloodshed, and then and the end of the first act we see it again and again. It's never a place where when we go back to the Jimmys, it's never boring. It's just that Jimmy Crystal is so engaging and he's sort of the centerpiece of the bookmark. I want to be there a little bit longer, but it's the other side that's so much more interesting. That I think the pacing of the both of them is terrific. Like I was never ever bored about watching one or the other. I was so engaged. I was like, oh my god, yes, we're going back. Oh my god, we're going back. Like I really like the cutting back and forth to these two places. Even though I do think the Jimmys, when they do end up somewhere near the Bone Temple, it does slow down. But I do find that those characters really interesting. But what I think one noticeable thing is that about these characters, and I know that the Jimmy Savile thing keeps on coming up about in conversation. I'll push on to Hillary in a second. I do apologise, but I think that this whole trilogy is almost about the inevitability in that. And this time stopped in 2002. These people stopped growing up. Like he's a scared kid who just becomes traumatized into these evil things because his father chose the church instead of his family. And his mother defends him to a last breath in the previous film, which is just horrific to watch. Even I can't even watch the opening sequence anymore. But there's sort of an inevitability here, and I think that the Jimmy Savile thing, obviously his crimes were not ever overtly put to the public, and in this universe he was never found to be guilty or anything like that. But here it's that there's an insight into, obviously, the audience perception, as we know that iconography is somewhat sinister, whereas those characters don't, and I like that play. But I'll move on to Hillary. I still enjoy the Jimmy Ink thing and the Jemima thing. There's horrifying to watch. But I just think that there's just a lack of spending a little bit less time with them, and I really did hope we would open the film him as maybe about 2 or 3 years on, how he's managed to. I mean, he was 8 when the outbreak took place. It's 28 years later. He's in his late 30s. He's in his late 30s. There's a whole history there that I think we're led to think about and led to for our imaginations to work. But I think, like you said earlier, I think that works in the opening film, but now we're getting answers about certain things here, and it doesn't answer those aspects to why he's crazy. I mean, it's like Michael Myers. Do you want to know him as a kid? I'm personally, I find that interesting. Others don't. So I think it's up to opinion. But I'll push on to Hillary. But I find Jack O'Connell really interesting as an actor. Anyway.
I have to agree with that. Jack O'Connell is one of those guys who appeared in several films several years ago, and then it seems like he vanished.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of bothered me a little bit because I thought, I think this guy has a lot of potential. Why is he not acting as much anymore? I'm just not seeing him in things. And it's very interesting, just within the past year, he's shown up in two amazing, well, one's a tentpole movie because this is part of a franchise, and then Sinners as well, playing very somewhat similar characters. He's playing villains in both controlling kind of like a cult of violent people. But I'm very much on the same thread as Jack, which is the questions of why. We don't really get an explanation of how he makes the leap from the trauma he had seeing his father taken by zombies, and how that Christian background took the leap into Satanism, and how he learned to manipulate people or control people enough to have a group of people doing his bidding. So that's kind of a question that's lingering over the movie. And because of the way the film ends, it seems like we're not going to get any solid answers about that. So this is just one of the, I think it's particularly with this thread of the film that there's a lot more questions that are just kind of, I don't know, overshadowing things for me.
Mm-hmm.
It does kind of explore that it's a mental health issue. He can hear his father's voice in his head, which isn't something that I expected. It could have been seen as a manipulation at the beginning, that first scene where it's just like, oh, my father's telling me to do this. But as the film reaches its conclusion, it becomes clear that that has to be somewhat real. There's no reason for him to be faking that anymore. So I think that like me not fully understanding where they're coming from or what their ultimate goal is, like he does state it near the end with Kelson, like, this is what we're doing and we're going to do this. But if the question is why, like, what is the end game, or what is that going to accomplish? So there's elements of this story that I have trouble with, as far as like not fully understanding it, and then also encountering things that I've seen before. So one thing I will give it credit for is that beginning scene is you can stab somebody in the leg and it will kill them. I think that's something that a lot of films don't show in an accurate way. People think because they've seen so many films that you can stab somebody anywhere and it's not going to kill them. You can cut somebody in the wrong place and it can be an extremely dangerous thing, and their life will be over in about, 2 to 3 minutes. It's really scary. So it does establish immediately that violence is real, and violence can, kill somebody quite quickly, even if it's an accident or self-defense. But it also illustrated to me immediately where this is a group that isn't going to work. If you have a villain who is constantly having his henchmen kill each other, or victims kill their henchmen to eliminate each other instead of growing numbers, because you do need numbers in order to do this, then you're not really sustaining the cult you're trying to build, or the group of people who are going to do your bidding. So it was very confusing to me. And then I think the last thing I'll say is there's elements of this I've seen before. I did bring up with a friend that I think he was saying like, oh, this is all stuff we've seen before. And I said, well, we've even seen a post-apocalyptic leader of a cult order people to fight in an empty swimming pool to the death. And he said, what film was that? And I said, oh, it was Turbo Kid. I think it's Turbo Kid. I hope I'm remembering the film title correctly. He said, it's like Michael Ironside is sitting over an empty pool and making people fight to the death. So there's little elements of things that I'm familiar with. And then I think the barn scene in particular, it is a really grisly scene. And I was like writing down notes and saying like, I really want to preempt this by saying I'm not trying to sound like an edgelord or anything like that, but I think part of the reason why I don't want to say it didn't bother me, it was a really horrible scene, but I had to remind myself like, oh, actually you have seen worse. You did see Martyrs, and you've seen stuff from like New French Extremity, when you were younger. So I am aware that films can go further. I'm not saying I enjoy those films, but people being skinned and tortured for hours, I had to remind myself, I was like, oh yeah, there is worse stuff out there. So it was really bothersome, and I didn't really expect that in a more mainstream film. But I think for people who are maybe younger and just walking into like a I don't want to say mainstream. It seems like so dismissive, but going into just like a big tentpole film, like I was saying before, and seeing prolonged torture scenes like this is probably very shocking. But it kept going back to, well, why is this happening? What's the point of doing this? Whereas in Martyrs, as upsetting as that film is, it becomes very apparent why they are skinning people or torturing people that long. So those are my preliminary thoughts. I'm just going to kind of leave it there, and I'm going to let somebody else talk.
I'm so happy you mentioned that early kill, Hillary, with the leg stabbing, because to be honest, I kind of forgot about that, but I had such a visceral reaction to that. Like, out of everything in this film, there's a lot of gruesome here. And I'm pretty good overall with violence. Like, if anyone's like, oh my gosh, this film is super violent, just be warned, I'm like, I'm normally totally okay with that. There was something about that leg and just how prolonged it was of him, like, just bleeding out and feeling that and begging for this, and he's fading. Oh my god, it was just it really got me for some reason. It was so gross. I think that was grosser than the barn for me. Granted, at the barn I was kind of screaming like, why is this woman just watching this happen and doing nothing? And like, after you see your friends get literally skinned alive, then she's like, oh, now I need to do something. Like, it was crazy to me. I do think there were some moments like that, actually, with the Jimmy stuff especially, where, like, I don't really know, and I don't love how Spike is used in this in general. Spike really takes like a backseat and just kind of, granted, like, he's just an innocent kid, but after the journey he went on of growing up in the last one more, I was kind of frustrated that he just kind of did nothing. But I also don't really know why he didn't, like, run away. Spike in the last film, like, went back to his home, he knows where it is, and dropped off the baby, and then was like, I'm gonna go live in the forest for a while, like, don't worry about me, I need to go do this for myself. And he seemed to be pretty okay at it. I don't know why he felt like he had to stay with the Jimmies when there are moments such as the night of the barn where, like, he easily could have got away, right? There was some stuff like that logically, and the same thing happened in the first film, where I was like, I don't know if this is really fully, like, as clean as probably it could have been when you actually break down the motivations and world building. It also bothers me so much, and Hillary, we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the call. I hate that they've established that the world around the UK is just, like, totally fine and normal, and that everyone's just aware that there's this zombie apocalypse on this one country, and then no one cares, and no one's going to help anyone on this island, and the people on the island seemingly don't even know there's, like, a world outside of the apocalypse. I think that world building is, like, disastrous for this franchise, I have to be honest.
Can I push back on that? I think that's probably one of the most honest aspects of the feature, to be fair, because I think one aspect of what this franchise is trying to suggest, and it's all with the archive footage earlier on, and especially with the previous thing, is that there's almost this, like, human instigation about wanting to especially the British mentality is that we want to maintain pomp and circumstance. When we're at the Holy Island, they have the Queen Elizabeth, I don't know what it is, the emblem on top of the pub and stuff like that. Like, I think these are people who are trying to maintain order where there is chaos. And I think one aspect of, not necessarily Britishism, but I think very much of the modern world is that, yes, I think there's a TV in the living room where it shows you horrifying things, but people just move on. And I think there's terrifying things happening now in the world, and I'm going to get up tomorrow and go to work. Like, I think there's such an interesting and yet, like, somewhat horrifying aspect to the, like, duology, where someone in a certain part of the world tomorrow is not going to wake up because they're being bombed or they're being shot. There's violence everywhere, and yet I live, let's say, 1,000 miles away, and it's fine. I think that aspect to it's quite terrifying. But I think I do somewhat agree with you. I think I know you mentioned this earlier, but they sort of retcon the Paris thing. I think once you open this up, you become, there becomes an issue of where you see the same thing happen all the time. I think you go from the intimate in these films, and then you go to the extreme, and I think that's what lacks an individual character here. I don't think you can do the craziness in Cumbria and the Highlands, as this is, when you do it like the road, or I think we did District 9, didn't we, Carson? It was like it's fun that's in South Africa. And it's amazing that that's not in New York, like Cloverfield or Godzilla and stuff. And I think that's one of the aspects to it. But I think I can understand what you mean about not opening up. I think there is, but I think I think this film is so against type. It's just not willing to go there. And I don't think anyone going into part 3, if anyone wants that, is certainly not going to do that. And I was surprised that they showed the 3 Swedish soldiers in the first film, to be fair. But I think that's probably as much as we're going to get. But do you know? You mentioned the knife earlier, Hillary, and you mentioned it as well, Cass. Sorry to interrupt, but do you not think it's really interesting that the knife plays a pivotal moment in the beginning for Spike and the end as well? The audience have to witness that wound in the opening for a really eerily prolonged amount of time. Yet every kill with an infected lasts a beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, gone, one, and then it's only when the film slowly and surely goes into its next stride in the other conversation we'll have later, in that we spend a lot of time dressing a wound, and we spend a lot of time with that, and the cuts and the edits, they change dramatically depending on perception of how we see those things. I think it was really interesting to do that, to humanize a villain and then villainize a human. It's very interesting.
I see what you mean, for sure. Going a little bit back conceptually with the conversation about the world around them and not helping out, for sure. I think it's interesting, and I guess I think the film probably is actually more. I actually think it's going to get more into it, I guess, in number 3. I find it very curious that the very end here, not to jump ahead, but they do talk about the Weimar Republic and how that affects Europeans' like ideology about like helping each other out in suffering, and how when a nation is suffering, it brings out the worst in humanity, which is the Weimar Republic into Nazi Germany. Here you have a country suffering, and it brings out the worst in humanity, as far as we see, at least with the Jimmies. I think there is probably more at play here than I'm giving it credit for. I think for me, I just think like there's literally people who like are. I find it, and I guess, we have a very small image of this world in both of these films. We're getting projected a very, very, just even on a physical level, we're talking about a few miles out of everything that's happening with this country and this island. But I think though, I feel like no one is helping them out. Feels like a bit of an extreme, but also it's, I can turn my brain off and kind of accept it conceptually.
You're also like a very empathetic person, though. Like I think I know. Think you are, though, as well. I think that there is like a torturous aspect to this, where we're just seeing people slowly succumb to the inevitable, and there's like a distance of 20 or 30 miles to the channel, and like they've just been left. And there's like a hauntingness about that. Like all this could stop, this could stop so easily. But I think that's the aspect of like the easy aspect of mankind itself. Like we can just stop this silliness. We can stop. I know silliness is like an arbitrary statement. I know that's ridiculous to say, but we could just not do certain things and live in a better world. But yet we seem to prolong It is really aggravating. I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. I just think you are very empathetic as a person.
You kind of got me. Like, you're right. No. That's so depressing. But like, no, you're right. Huh? Well,
it's definitely not a bad thing, and I think Jack knows more about this than we do. I have a faint memory of the last time we spoke about this, that there are supplemental materials. Like, isn't there like graphic novels explaining more about the world or the potential for a cure because of 28 weeks later?
Yeah, but they're
28,
not
canon, 28 weeks
later.
Because
there's one that's a prequel and then a sequel between Days and Weeks, which is not canon because it tells you about about what like the how the outbreak really happened with the chimps, and then there's an actual comic strip with Selena, which it's not really a spoiler this because I think it's but not canon whatsoever because Garland's got nothing to do with it. But she essentially goes back in the middle between days and weeks, and you find out Jim is in Germany being executed by Henry West's brother, and then you find out Hannah is being dragged away to be a prostitute, and then you find that Selena's been taken back to Manchester. And then Henry West's brother tries to kill her and she kills him, but she then leaves to go to France on a plane, and the outbreak happens when she's flying, getting on a plane to America. But it's not canon. But that's it. But I forgot to tell you, I read the 28 Years Later screenplay by Alex Garland for Halloween in October, and it's a little bit different on occasion. The opening's very different, but yeah, so there's very little like supplement material to like. There's so little here aside from the films. I think there's one aspect where I think it's the strongest is that I'm so fucking tired and bored of having to read a comic strip or a one shot or finding something later on, and it's already happening now. Like they're already talking about Jimmy Ink and Jimmy Crystal had they found each other when they were 8. They've been there the longest. That's all well and good, and I think you can somewhat infer that from the material. But please God, can we just acknowledge that in the film? I think we've just got to keep these as entities, or keep it, either explain it or don't. I'm not. I'm so tired of having to have like supplementary material that comes out in 2 or 3 years time. Like, Ian Kelson is actually like, let's say, really he's not really a doctor. He just lied about it. It's like, no, let's just have the film. Let's enjoy the film, and then let's not have to go back on anything. Because I think like what Carson said, like, there's so much here, yet it's so minute in what we're actually having a discussion about. And so I think that the discussion's really massive, but we're pinpointing a very small part. And I quite like that these characters are in a massive world, but their moments are quite huge.
No, I agree. I love that, and we'll get to Dr. Ian in like 1 second. But I do
No, that's
like the
fine.
fact that he's like just sitting there, and we're just seeing this guy, and we have all this emotion, and we see him, and we're so invested in what he's doing. But really, he's just like, again, this one guy who's just sitting in a field, this random field there. Like no one ever, in the context of this giant world that he exists in, no one's heard of him. No one thinks of him. He's not important at all. But I like the fact that we're focusing on such a small character in the grand scheme of things, but also seeing his importance. I love that. The last thing I want to say about the Jimmies is I thought this was a very, very strong look at theocracy and looking at specifically, I love the fact that Jimmy, the main Jimmy Crystal, Jack O'Connor, like he's bullshitting, but he also like believes to a degree like what he's saying. I think as we see the rise of religion playing roles in politics and playing roles in government and playing roles in society, it's very easy to look and villainize if you do not believe in religion or you do not have that religious connection and think that people are fully manipulating and fully just completely lying about what they believe. And I'm sure a lot of people do, to be fair. Like I'm sure a lot of people do. But I did like that it showed that, like, yes, he's manipulating and he's using this for power and using this for control, but he also has that element where he genuinely believes in what he's talking about. I just thought it was a very complex look at the subject, and one that I thought was very worthy for the current moment we exist in, to engage with, I think, the ideals and this rise of problematic ideals tied to religion, or rather empowered by certain religious practices and beliefs.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the dynamic, especially with the Savile implications of how he takes multiple different types of people. I mean, these are Welsh kids, Scottish kids, so he's travelled a lot throughout the UK to acquire like these fingers. I quite like the depth. I think the showcases of how damaged of injury he is. But I think the screenplay here, especially with Jack O'Connell, how he talks to Spike and certain things about like carving people's faces off. There's sort of this horrifying note that he's very loud, but he has a softness to him. And I think that there's like a brittleness there that it's breaking slowly but surely. It's breaking, because he's going on to do these like wicked and terrifying things, and yet you can tell that there's parts of the group that are sort of breaking down, and other parts of it, like Jemima, that there's like an implication for like 2 seconds in this where things are going to get really grotesque and really go into the Jimmy Savile vibes, and I think that's an element that's cut out of maybe for the censors or partly because it goes into a route there where you're going on nose to nose about the Savile things. And I think most importantly, I think the Savile is basically just a physical, so like a visual representation more than a literal one as well. I just think it's meant there, again, like I said before, to infer to the audience about distrust, because most of the world, and it's not a naive thing, it's just that I think that name resembles a certain disgust, and rightly so. But I think within the Jack O'Connell thing, like there's this horrifying notion, like there's just like this subtleness, but it's breaking slowly and surely. The one thing I sort of discredit, and I think Hillary said it a little bit earlier, is that when he has his eventual meeting with someone at this temple, he sort of just cracks very simply, and then towards the end, I think he cracks again, and I think they come at very strange aspects there, because it feels like we're not seeing certain things in between. We're seeing the stuff that's happened before, and granted, I'm not. I know I don't want to contradict myself about supplemental material, but obviously that group, that dynamic, is not quite right for multiple reasons. But there are strange circumstances that perhaps have happened before where people are maybe becoming disillusioned with that. And I can't help but feel it's not necessarily Spike coming to the fold, because you watch the opening and there's people like frothing at the mouth about what Spike does, except for one person. And then things start to break down and break down and break down. Now, if that leads to people being overtly damaged in the follow up, then that's fine. But again, like you said, these films, that they don't seem to be individual pieces. You mentioned earlier about the trilogy. I'll move on to it in a second. I do apologize again, but you mentioned about trilogies earlier, and I find that this is a really interesting one. I wanted to bring this up in my notes. There's you. I think you mentioned the Star Wars trilogy, and that's not what came to mind when I watched this. There's one trilogy that comes to mind here, and it's not going to be the M word, don't worry. But it's actually The Godfather. I feel like Years and Bone Temple are part 1 and 2, where you see them back to back because they make sense, with the character going through the shit in the first film and then having to lean on certain things in the second, and then getting backstory in depth. And I think they work really well as a two-piece, and you can watch them as a two-piece. I think the third film is a larger supplemental material. Now, I like Coda, and I like Part 3. Either version I quite like. I feel like what's coming next is going to be supplementary material. I feel like these arcs are done, which is quite strange to see. I think the Jimmy Crystal thing, to just come full circle with the Jimmy Crystal thing, I think his arc comes really nicely full circle. There is a moment towards the end where he's saying certain things which reminded me of the opening, and fucking almost got me, for a character who is horrifically despicable. There's this one thing he says in that film, and I'm like, oh my god, he's just a little boy, and it's partly to how the film is constructed, but partly how good he is as an actor, Jack O'Connell. And it's interesting that Hillary said he has disappeared for a while. I don't know if there's private issues there or personal things, but he got quite big in 2014 with Starred Up 71, and then he did Unbroken with Angelina Jolie. And for the last 10 years, has really been in small pieces, aside from playing the villain in the Amy film about Sam Johnson, Taylor. We'll leave that alone for a little bit. Aside from that, he hasn't actually done anything. Obviously starring in Danny Boyle's Ink, which is shot in Halifax, weirdly enough. Danny Boyle, this was shot in Bradford as well, which is quite funny. And then he's going to go, I don't know what he's going to do after this. But yeah, I just think he's terrific here. It's weird how he plays kid and adult and in between so well here. The dynamic is brilliant. And it's a shame that Alfie Williams, Spike, does get lost in the background. But I think these films are all perspectives about how you are as a child, and how you are an adult, and the difference. I think the opening of how Jimmy Crystal sees certain things, with how that's shot, infers a lot of different circumstances. And Alfie Williams' Spike towards the end of Years has also strange, albeit out of body experience of seeing these people be heroes, and then how Nia DaCosta uses camera, lens, and space, and in this film, especially with their edit, firmly puts these fuckers' feet on the ground now in reality, about how they are when they become adults. And it's interesting of how that dynamic is then with Jamie as well. But I'll move on then how it's going to be with Jim, especially towards the end. But yeah, I'll move on from that because there's a lot to talk. But again, I think Jack O'Connell's sensational here. Really, really tough thing to do as well, to make someone horrifying, susceptible to have a bit of a motive. But I think he's terrific.
We can definitely still mention the Jimmy stuff. Definitely not to close the door completely on that. But I do think it's time we bring in the other side of the film, because there's another entire half of this film about Dr. Ian, who we followed in the first film. This is him, again, as I kind of mentioned. He has this alpha named Samson that he's named. We met him in the first film, terrorized Spike in that first one. But he's starting to not necessarily just be raging violence. He starts to show a little bit of humanity, especially when he's drugged with morphine. And they form like a bit of a friendship and bond as Ian tries to figure out this virus. Can I cure this? What is going on in the mind of someone who's infected? This is definitely, for me, I would say, the highlight of the film, which is weird because I think I normally don't respond to things that get quite absurdist in nature. And there are some scenes here where it's just them drugged out of their mind, hanging out, and like dancing that you would never expect out of a zombie feature. But for me, it worked really well. Not only did I think it was entertaining and fun, but also really I thought it was an engaging use of the zombie narrative, of looking at what happens when you are clouded by rage and really taking that from an almost like scientific approach. This also then leads into a future conversation in that meeting that we've referenced, as far as being like, is this infection something of science, or is it something of God and of holy involvement, or is it the devil and Satan? I really like this bit. I'm curious what you guys thought of this arc.
I'll jump in here because this part of the film is the part of the film I liked, and it was the same with the first one. And now I'm thinking to myself, if there was just a film about this man in this post-apocalyptic world, burying the dead, creating salutes to the dead, trying to find a cure for this virus that's destroyed the UK, I would find that very fascinating, and everything that's kind of churning around it. While it is somewhat important because there are characters who cross paths with this character, yeah, the rest of it just isn't as interesting to me, or I'm not getting what I want or as a viewer out of it. Because I guess I should say, like, I'm not a huge zombie movie person. I don't hate zombie movie films, but usually what they're trying to address is not what I'm looking for. So this part of the film was just kind of a continuation of that for me. He is a character that, in very dire circumstances, I usually look for the character. It's like, who is the character I'd want to learn the most from? Who do I want to be in that situation? And Dr. Ian Kelson, the way he's handled things, as difficult and isolating and horrible as it may be day to day, I would want to be more that guy than anyone else that I'm seeing this entire franchise at this point. But I mean, there's revelations about him that he's a huge fan of Duran Duran and some like new wave bands, and the use of the song "Ordinary World" at one point during one of the montages. I found that it connected to me immediately because for some reason that song was played a lot one year in my life, and I thought, oh my god, I used to go to the public swimming pool as a kid, and that would be playing on like the sound system. It's just like, why are they playing Duran Duran at the swimming pool? So it brought back memories for me, and memories of that world that he would be remembering as a character. The 90s, maybe the early 2000s before the outbreak. There's Radiohead in there, and of course, Iron Maiden at the end. So it's interesting to see these bits of pop culture and what they mean to this character, and how, in a way, it's sustaining him and actually deepening this relationship with Samson, which I found very interesting. And I wrote down this question, and maybe this is just me misinterpreting things. He does ask the question, when the zombies attack, what are they seeing? There's a psychiatric layer to the zombies feeling the need to be violent and, feeding off of people. They do show Samson eating brains, which I thought was interesting. It's like, oh, they do eat brains in this franchise. But the casting of the person he attacks at the beginning was a little bit discombobulating to me, because it made me think, like, when Samson, this character we're somewhat aligned with, is attacking people, is he seeing himself? Are people who are attacking humans are they seeing themselves? Because it was a man who was physically similar to him, also a hunter. It brought up so many questions, and of course, there wasn't an answer for it.
I think that the the Kelson and Samson arc or narrative is the perfect embodiment of what this franchise is, and it's counter programming. This would be secondary Day of the Dead 85, 10 minutes and an hour and 30-minute film of just background, and then there's a, oh my god, we found the cure. Totally against that. This is the meat and potatoes of a film about trying to find humanity in the things that either are lost or are yet to be found. And there's such a genuine beauty and insight into this dynamic because it's the old trying to find some sort of resemblance in the new, and the new trying to find some semblance in the old. That there's a wonderful dynamic here that comes together, and it's almost like poetry. And it's wonderfully shot. It's wonderfully acted. I think, like Hillary said, to echo that, I think the score here used as well is really sort of not necessarily uplifting, but inviting, engaging. But just their dynamic on screen is worthy of it. And again, the tragedy is that it's almost like positioned against these horrifying things of this unstoppable object is going to come and meet this immovable force. There's sort of this inevitability about it, and it's very much like what Kelson says about this. He has a monologue about there was certainty about things back then. There was certainty now. There's so much uncertainty, and I think there's an interesting parallel there, but also an aspect of which one you find solace in. I think a lot of people like to be rudimentary. I think a lot of people like to be to live in a world not necessarily naive like the Holy Island is, but there's sort of a regimented life there. That's of how they dictate what they want to do, how they manage to keep alive, and then Dr. Kelson does exactly the same thing through the temple, but it's finished. Its purpose is being served, and then you go back to Sir Jimmy Crystal's gang, their purpose going on like this. It's all about just finding something to help the world in these sort of very weird and vast ways. But that dynamic on screen is really electric, and it's interesting because I think I don't think that the Ian Kelson and Sansom dynamic is evolutionary in terms of we've never seen this in the genre, but it's probably its most heartfelt. And in this franchise, it never feels like it's ever going to go there. And I sort of to echo Hillary's points about it feels conventional for the Doctor to find the cure, and I've been reading a lot about certain things about that aspect about it, and you know I don't think there's a cure here, and I'll be very I'll be very I'm not trying to be specific about certain things because I know we'll talk about spoilers a little bit later, but I think that's the beauty of this is that if you really want to engage with something, and you really want to help, and you really want to actually make a difference, you can. You can make the difference if if Spike would have said something about to Jimmy Inc. about Ian Kelson, would that have ended up like that towards the end? Would other things have happened? Probably not. Would Jamie, if he'd have gone and met Dr. Kelson in the first film all those years ago, would Isla still be alive? Would she be better off? There's so many things about also like making the right decision, but also if you are really wanting to make that change, you'll do it. And I think the fact that he just proves the point there. I don't think there's going to be this sort of magical thing where we get into a third film like, I think there's the point's been proved that if the like you said, Carson, earlier on about if anyone wanted to help the UK, anyone would help these people truly, they could do it. They tried to. I don't know if we get it cannot within the canon if we're going to accept weeks. I know that it's mentioned in years beforehand and stuff like that about this second virus unleashing. So I don't know how specific these writers want to go into that because I know Garland has nothing to do with it. But I think it goes to show that these this world could help these people. There's quite a lot to learn about, not necessarily empathy, but how this disease works and so on and so forth. But there's such an engaging aspect to that and such a beauty to it. And I think towards the end, there's some like there's going to be some memes about certain things, but there's a really sort of beautiful thing about it. But I thought the train sequence was exhilarating with Lewis in it. I can never remember his name. I think, is it Chai? I don't want to get his name wrong.
It's either Chi or it's Chai. Chi. I think Americans would pronounce his name Chi Lewis Perry, but it might be Chai. He's an amazing actor in this. He's given so much more to do in this one, as far as and playing stuff that's very difficult with very, very little, like no dialogue, no nothing, just close-ups.
No, I completely agree with that, because I think simplistic, playing that, and then quote unquote air quotes here, that's playing that role simplistic. But I think as an actor, that would be very difficult to sort of showcase a motive range there, or even to show not necessarily lightheartedness, but try and open that character by doing very little. And I think the little small subtle of just catching the rein in the hand, the breathing, the eyes, the moving the neck and stuff like that. It's trying to not make an animal or a beast, but trying to find some humanity in it. I think it's really difficult to do that, and I think the dynamic with Ralph Fiennes, of how excellent he is there. There's such a great dance partner there, such a great dance partner, and I think, again, I feel like that is an arc now that has been explored, is finished. I find that very difficult to see those two. There's a lot more for Samson to go on, but I find that the little we know about the next step now, the more interesting, because there's a certain event that happens in the train sequence where Samson gets attacked. Now, is that an aspect where those things carry that mutation on, like about the baby in the 28 years later? I'd rather not know those things, because there's so much more investment or engagement there. I just like the limited amount of material we get, and I think their dynamic for me is really well achieved. But it is one of the most heartbreaking aspects to it. It's really well done. I have slight hesitations about it just stopping all of a sudden. The Memento Mori thing comes out again. Well, I'm like, this feels very much like, oh, we've got to have this little bit moment. I'm granted it's a film and we've got to see that arc finish, but to me it was like, oh, would he really have noticed that? I don't know, but it feels like it's eventually going to get there. But I think Ralph Fiennes is fabulous here, really, really good. You don't really get to know a lot about him either, which I think is very compelling to the nature of the beast, where I think that the man is just done. I mean, there's a sequence here where he administers something, and it's not the second time, it's the first time, where we get this infamous scene that's going to be memed to hell. I could feel that the tears running down that man's cheek there. Like, there's such power there about he's going to break this oath. He's going to break this oath that he knows when he signed up for as a doctor. That's the one thing you can't do. And he's going to do it just because he knows that this person's in so much pain. I think there's such a torment there to want to do what's the right thing. Are these people, are these infected? I think there's such the morality of surrounding this really questionable and really well explored. But again, the humanity that Ralph Fiennes brings to a franchise that has struggled with that quite a few times, I think is really interesting.
Well, and one conversation we've seen throughout, and he's already kind of filled this role, but we've seen a lot of conversation about fatherhood and about fathers and about being there for somebody. And I love the line where he says, I've never worried about dying because I've been here alone, but all of a sudden I felt this fear because I worried what's going to happen to Samson, even though it's not necessarily directly like a father figure role. I think that plays into it also quite wonderfully. I agree. I think it's very tender. I think it's very beautiful. Ralph Fiennes, and we'll talk about him in a little bit for our question of the week, but I think he is genuinely perfect here. I mean, I think overall, I guess I would say the casting of this franchise, or this series or trilogy, whatever you want to call it, has been pretty stunning. We've already kind of talked about some of them, but I think everyone is cast to perfection. I was curious, Jack, you mentioned earlier that there was a big read you had here about the health system, about healthcare.
Yes.
I know he references healthcare as kind of like a little joke in this, but obviously there's a lot here about medicine, about the doctor's oath, about the role of doctors. I would love if you could kind of go into that a little bit more, because I didn't necessarily get that as like a big theme here, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
So this comes back to 2012 in the Olympics, where Danny Boyle did the opening ceremony about English heritage, about the Industrial Revolution, looking at notorious things in our history. Obviously, which are going to be some more positive than others. Don't get me wrong. I don't think there's very much blood on our hands. Don't get me wrong there, but I think there was one thing that either he couldn't put in for political reasons, or he didn't have time, and he wanted to celebrate the NHS. Now, the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, is a tax funded aspect to our country, in which you pay a tax money into it, which is very minute for the individual person, and you get free healthcare, and that's a range subjects from anything. You can go private and so on and so forth, but the majority of things are taken care of by the state, ultimately by the taxpayer, which is slowly but surely getting eroded by the Conservatives. Now, not to go on a bit of a political mission here, but ultimately, in the last sort of 15 to 20 years in this country, the Tories have eroded the public healthcare and put it into privatisation and sold it off to the Friends, which means that funding is very minute. So in small areas, villages, towns, particularly in working class towns like Newcastle, where I'm from, in West Yorkshire, and Huddersfield, they shut down A&E, which is accident and emergencies, which is pivotal for how people get healthcare in this country. Maximise waiting times, limit doctors, so on and so forth. The first film very much is about Brexit, about stripping the UK away from its helpers and surrounding neighbours, and getting lost in the fact of it wants to be on its own, and then how it solidifies that, which it breaks into torment. It's very clear. I think that's a fundamental aspect that Danny Boyle noted about. But a secondary aspect in this film, again, is about healthcare, about learning to I think helping the other, or helping others, and the other is a particular example in Samson here. But Danny Boyle mentioned the NHS about wanting to put it in the Olympics, but wasn't able to. I think that's here is just a secondary thing about showcasing aspects of British culture that regardless if it gets eroded or it's politicalized, is that it's our very nature of beings, about being British. It's what we do, and the NHS came about in I believe in the 40s, before or after the war as well, in a time of horrificness about the UK. Most of Birmingham, most of London was flattened. It was up north that survived, where people and children went to evacuate. And there's a weird irony about that in this film as well, about with setting the film in London, and the first one evacuating, going up north to Manchester. We go to the Highlands in the previous one. We're in Cumbria in this. There's an interesting aspect about the beauty of up north, and the green lavishness, and the sycamore tree, and then the hatred behind people of being left behind, and also villainized others because of other politics. But there's a very much prominent feeling here in this film about healthcare system, about doing the right thing and helping people. And the fact that he notes that, and he says about the NHS, he says, and you don't have to pay for it. I think it's like a tongue-in-cheek thing, because in my lifetime it will disappear. And I think it's a Danny Boyle thing. Might be Alex Garland more so because he wrote the screenplay, but I think Boyle was definitely involved here. It's just noting the fact of who we are as people. Where there's people there who are generous, nice people who want to be. I think Dr. Ian Kelson embodies what Danny Boyle and Alex Garland see as the typical British person who welcomes others, knows it's a country divided, but it's populated by diversity, who's willing to help others and not wanting anything back. I think he's the embodiment of hope, but also a beacon of light that is slowly being eroded by everything around him, who's a generational gap that's no longer there. And I think it's really perfectly embodied here. That's probably about it. Again, Brexit NHS, two massive issues that are happening in the UK now: immigration and othering other people who have different skin tones to us. It's stuff like that. They're very much a politicalisation of it all. But it'd be interesting what Gall and Boyle choose for the third film, because they both mentioned redemption, and I think that film will become more less of a trope, well, more of a trope than a reality. But there's definitely a conversation here about healthcare, about helping. There's a certain thing here where Jamie and Spike go off into the first film, and it's about they can't think, they're not human. If they can't think, that they're not one of us. And then there's the disposition there is, you've got a man of science, an atheist. Again, it's not really relevant, but a man who believes in, obviously, he's a doctor, believes in helping people, will not kill these things, knows what they do. He mentions that they attack babies in a monologue here, which is like how he delivers that is really horrifying, because it's so mundane and just there's just nothing emotion behind it. It's like, and he explains it such an on the nose manner, like a doctor would do, and there's sort of this gripping nature that this man has probably seen evil and terrifying things, does a terrifying sort of gruesome thing in a beautiful way of this like temple that he builds. I just think it's such an interesting thing about having to take care of someone and the healthcare system. That's really about it. To be fair, it's strangely on the nose here. I think the interesting aspect is it's vocalized, rather than, I think the first one is very much like, oh, we're going from one place to another, we're othering people, and again that's what happens in an apocalyptic nature. But I thought it was very brazen and somewhat brave to actually sort of mention it outright. And I laughed in the cinema about it, because I think it was just quite a funny little moment of relief. I don't think anyone else did, but I quite like that tongue-in-cheek nature of it, even that 28 years later in Apocalypse, there's someone still trying to do some good, and the nature of something that's a positive influence on this country, and it should be maintained that way. That's probably about it, to be fair, Carson. There's probably little else there.
Well, no, I thought that's rich. That's great perspective. That's why I like having these conversations. I'm just a dumb American. I don't know what that means in the UK. I have no idea. Okay, sure. Haha, funny joke about healthcare. So, no, I love that perspective. Did you know you could be listening to this episode of ClapperCast early? Well, if you go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/ClapperCast podcast, there are 3 different tiers that you can choose from, each with their own means of support and each with their own means of rewards. You can get access to early episodes, bonus monthly episodes, bonus reviews. You can see our schedule early. Of course, thank you everyone who's already joined us on Patreon, and we hope to see you over there soon.
There's other things about Kelson that I wanted to focus on a little bit, which is especially in the first one, he is like I mean, it seems a little harsh to say this, but he is like a harbinger of death a little bit. And I've heard it mentioned before that there's the angel of death, and everyone's afraid of the angel of death, the Grim Reaper coming for you. And someone once pointed this out to me, that character is vilified in like the worst way possible, because that character's job is someone to lead you into the next life. They aren't responsible for your death. They're not going to kill you. They're just someone who's taking you from one place to the next, considering what you believe. And of course, that's, part of the film itself, the belief systems the different characters have. But Kelson is like that in a way. I think, Jack, you were addressing the scene where he contemplates injecting Samson and killing him to relieve him of his pain and his illness. And then, Samson says a word, which is this kind of revelatory moment. He says moon, which is, what a beautiful word. It's one of my favorite words. So it was this great moment, and another example of connection between these two people who should be on opposite ends. Samson's very much framed as, an antagonist in the first one, the most out of control, the most brutal, the most threatening alpha, zombie out there. And Kelson decides to experiment on him. And I did like the scene where the first time he drugs him, he says, "There's nothing wrong with peace and respite." And then he takes the drugs himself and lays down next to him. And I was a little intrigued by that because I wondered if it was giving Samson a pathway, like if this doesn't work, he'll kill me and then I'll be over with. That he was ready to go from the beginning.
I inferred the same, Hillary. Actually, yeah, I agree with you about that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just this little moment. It's easy to forget, but yeah, just him making these really difficult decisions about what is right, what is wrong, and hopefully that was being imparted to Spike in the first one. And Spike, even though he is really lost in the mix and they didn't make him as smart as he should have been, I think Carson brought up a really good point. You want to make your characters as smart as possible in any film that you do, even if they're a child. There were so many opportunities for him to run away. The fact that I think that once he knew that Kelson was in the mix, I thought like, you should leave and go to Kelson
agreed.
immediately. Like that there was no reason for him to stay with them, but he is able to retain that he doesn't completely lose himself and become one of the Jimmies, that the only acts of violence is that he commits are either in self-defense or defending others. So he is somewhat still on the same path, but it was kind of a convoluted one. And I think with that, maybe we should segue into the big showdown that goes to an 11. I did like that reference in there. It's like, I'm going to take this to an 11 before his pyrotechnics and everything is set up, which went really well. Kelson is good at everything, apparently.
What an incredible sequence of him bringing the devil to life. I know that's been heavily put in marketing, which I think is kind of not frustrating because I think they don't give it fully away, but like I wish it was just I went into this scene completely blind. One of the best needle drops of the year for sure. One of the best uses of music. One of the best I was really worried even visually just from the marketing because I thought the visuals of the scene looked a little bit off, but in the theater I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, obviously, it's like already in January and a standout scene of the year.
I
You hated it. Oh my
no,
god.
no, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. There's a there's one thing about the two films that has stayed with me, and it's the Young Father's score from the first film, which I know that on a lot of like OG fans hated it. I find that to be really gripping. I still listen to Pals, Lola, Causeway's magnificent, and Promised Land is outstanding. When it was noted that Young Fathers weren't going to come back to do the score, I was really trepidatious. I don't know why that wasn't just a through point through all the three films, but the fact that they weren't coming back, yet it was noted they were going to do one song for this film, and that song's never been announced, and it was not in the film at all. Again, worried me. I don't mind the needle drops. I don't mind. I think the Duran Duran thing's really fun because it's just you don't really hear a lot about Duran Duran. And if it's going to be I thought it was going to be British. I thought they'd put Spandau Ballet or something in it. But I think the Duran Duran was fun. The Iron Maiden, it's all cool, but I just missed that Young Fathers like angelic, the dystopian, um, ethereal type of score here. And I think as much as I think the ending with Iron Maiden is really fun, I think there's just something there. If you ever listen to Young Fathers when they do Shame or Get On Up, they're a Scottish band, but they're so interesting of how they do the dialect and how they do production, and the manifestation of their songs are really interesting. If people like Idols or Sleaford Mods and stuff like that, I know Raphael Felix, friend of the show, Nick's friend who I've met before at Cannes, loves Idols. So shout out to Raphael, loves Idols, and but Young Fathers to me are better. I just think there's something so potent about how they do the score for the first film, and I think it really lacks here. I think the score throughout is absolutely terrible. There's nothing here where I think it elevates any material, but I do think that the Iron Maiden is really good fun. I do think it's very much like overzealous and silly at certain points, but there is sort of like this idea where it sort of indulges the fact that these are just childish idiots. Like the fact that we've got to this point where, again, I think we can probably open about spoilers. He has to impersonate old Nick. I think just reinforces the fact that this is a childlike entity of Jack O'Connell, and everyone else there is sort of just looking for purpose. and I think that's how silly people just lose their way. They just want to look for purpose. I think that the spectacles are magnificent. I think that I think I agree to you to some extent, though, Carson. It's been rammed down everyone's on throats, especially in the teaser, the posters, which I think is great iconography that infers like because everyone thought, oh my god, he must be infected, and I love the
Mm-hmm.
fact that it almost goes there, but there's just an aspect of it. Recently, it's in every trailer, it's in every TV spot, and I think it's just been diluted because everyone's going, oh, the last 5 minutes are amazing, and they are. But I'm not that type of person who sort of gets a standard at the spectacle. I thought the intimacy so much outweighs that in this film. I think there's so much of beauty of Parry Lewis and Ray Fiennes here. I just find that so exhilarating that to me not necessarily comes as anticlimactic, but at that point I'm just so much more interested in where that's going to go. Um, it is dark, it is dreary, but then it just ends as well.
Oh
It
no,
just it
did he
comes
cut
to like
out?
this really anticlimactic spot, and I think there's sort of this note where there's like this pause and reflection, and I think it comes at a really awkward and odd time where there's sort of then we have to have these two meet again, which is obviously Kelson and Spike, and there's no way. I mean, he looks at his eyes. He says, "Oh, you have your." I don't know if he says he has his mother's eyes in the first one. I can't remember at this point. Um, but there's sort of like that. I just think I think it has to right itself to that point, and I feel like it's such a forced
Mm.
and unneeded error because I
Yeah.
think there's sort of this horrifying beauty if that Spike knows that it's him and Spike knows what's going to happen. Spike won't speak up because he knows what's going to happen to him, and Ian Kelson doesn't know. I think there's a really horrifying nature to that. That again, the memento mori and I don't know. I just think there's not a beauty to it because that sounds sadistic, but I think there's an interesting rhyme and rhythm that how that rhymes to the first film where
Mm.
they went into the Bone Temple thinking it was a place of evil, and Ray Fiennes helped them, and then that's not reciprocated back because he's a scared young boy. I think that works a lot better in the long run of a character development because then he goes, oh, I just think it just becomes a little bit too cute and a little bit too um,
Mhm.
nicely wrapped up. But other than that, I think the set piece is spectacular. But this is a film where I cannot believe I'm saying it. The intimacy of it's so much more compelling than the set piece.
Yeah. I also think part of that though is like the direction of the Jimmies, and again, like really analyzing what is their role in this series and how it was established in the first film. Like, I do think when you understand that it was just a means to the end, really, to get this girl to go with Spike. Uh, I think that does hurt the scene and the potential of this confrontation, because I don't think that's necessarily the most rewarding or thrilling outcome. I also think just the power dynamics of actually when you get into the dialogue, and they've fully convinced these 4 or 5 people that they're in presence of the devil. I mean, you have that moment of meeting your like religious god. I do think that power could have probably been wielded a little bit more effectively. When that drops, it does feel a little bit forced in the sense of like, I don't think after you've gone through the visceral experience that you've gone through that you're willing to just be like, oh, that's not him. Okay, I guess. Like, I do think that was wielded a little bit strangely.
No, I
Yeah.
agree. It's all kind of clunky and just yeah. I think that what I struggled with within the scene was the logistics of it. Ray Fiennes has a lot of time on his hands, but just how like how much effort had to be put into that. Like he has the upside down crucifix already. He has the coat. I kept thinking like, where did he get the coat from? Like, where did he get the eye makeup from? Like everything, like to pull off a show, he already has like prepared statements to say to make him seem like Satan. Like no rehearsal, no nothing. So that kind of took me out of things a little bit. As far as he's good at what he does, but he can't be that good. And then for all of it to fall apart so quickly and then for him to go back on his agreement and he's like, I think that you should crucify Jimmy. and
100%.
then
Yeah.
and then he gets stabbed and then Spike stabs Jimmy and then the girl says like, oh well, I'll crucify Jimmy. So then Jack O'Connell ends up on this upside down cross and I just thought that's like a lot that's a lot happening in a really short period of time, and it just seems like a lot. I don't know.
No, I
Also
think
scheduled for the exact time you meet Samson every night. That felt like, is there no
Yeah.
plan for when when the zombie comes and there are all these people here and you're just like, well, hold on, let me just go talk to him really quick. Like that feels awkward
I
timing.
no,
don't
I
know.
think
I mean, well, especially like after he came out of the train, I entertained the possibility because he's completely covered in blood that he was going to go back to Kelson, and in the
Mm,
middle of their little theatrical shindig, suddenly Samson shows up, and Samson just like kills all of the Jimmies because he sees them as a threat or something.
yeah.
Like I thought that might happen. They're like, oh no, that guy is Satan because he's completely covered in blood and he's
Yes.
naked and he looks crazy, but that didn't happen either. So
well, I think the fact that earlier on when Kelson goes out and he says Samson's name and Samson doesn't come back,
mhm.
I think he sort of lets it be that something may have gone wrong, if it's gone bad or good, but that the things worked. I think the issue with the finale for me is that I think, and I believe Danny Boyle mentioned it in the press. I don't know, depending on how you feel about detriment or a positive. I think positive in the fact that he knows fans are going to come back, but he kept on mentioning Jim coming back, Jim coming back, Jim coming back, Jim coming back. It's like, oh, that's fair enough. You know, you get people bums on seats because Cillian Murphy's the thing at the moment, and rightly so, 'cause he's amazing. But I think that one point is that you know that this story, years and days, are going to come to a line at one point because it's been mentioned multiple times. And the fact of the matter is that from the moment this trilogy has started, it's writing itself to Jim, and you can totally tell that when they get to Kelson at the end, you know where like it has to sort of it has to go back on the tracks because it's so off the tracks at that point. No pun intended, with the train. But then it has to sort of go back on itself, and to me, it just feels like, why would they just? Everyone seems to walk down that path at the same time in the space of like 15 minutes in pitch black. You get um, you get Jimmy Inc. Kelly and Spike leave. Then Samson comes back, and then Samson leaves. Then something allegedly attacks Sir Jimmy Crystal. It's like everything happens in the space of like 10 minutes, where we've had this massive, drawn out, huge display of music, fire, and just sound, and it hasn't attracted anything. You know, it just feels to me like it's not very much thought through, because we know we've got to get back to see someone else. We've got to get this. We've got to get this arc, this writing to go to one place. I think it was a little bit more loose on that fact, where we didn't have to have that coda, that epilogue, which I think works well. But I think you've got to separate them a little bit more, because here it just writes itself into it. But that's where I come down to the fact I feel that this is a two-piece done. I feel like the beauty of it is that we know Jim. We know Jim will go back in that house in a heartbeat, in the midst of death, and knowing that he may not survive, in order to get Selena and Hannah. We as an audience know that in respite, that Jim's a good person in a world of rage. Now, Danny Boyle before I think he did the premiere, said that surprisingly, in this horror movie, which ends on a really downer note, we end on a very uplifting note. This is the uplifting note, that two people who are lost are going to be found by someone finally, that we know is going to help them. And I think the whole sequence before, about him talking about Churchill and the Axis and stuff like that, about, you know, is probably a prelude and a foreshadowing for the next one about the Holy Island. But I think more so, this works really well in the fact that he's going to go back to someone that we know in the audience is going to help him, and we don't need to see that. I'm done now. I feel like the two work really well back to back with the Jimmy Crystal character, because you go through this torment of a young boy in the beginning, and we know that we find a young boy at the end of years, and that one is older and seen the world, and you feel like he's going to be, you know, there's a man there to help him, and then we see the ramifications of it. And the irony of the rhyming of this is that it opens up with a screaming, and the first word you hear is hello, which is the first word Jimmy Inc. said, but now it's Jim, and when he's at the church. And then we cut back, the epilogue is again with Jim, comes full circle. To me, that's that it needs to sort of be ending here, because there's a really beauty in the fact that, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that those infected are not going to get them, or whatever you want to infer. If you want to go that down, oh, they're going to kill them. No, they'll be fine. But they go back to Jim. They know they're safe. Jim will always do the right thing. I think that neatly ties everything in a bow there. Did we get to see Selena? No, but it does have the 3 stones of Selena. It has JSSS, which is Selena. I don't know if there was a H there for Hannah, but I think that's the beauty of it's done now. Because other than that, I think the one thing that this franchise had was Jack O'Connell. If you're going to open the film, this franchise, with him as a boy, I think you're going to have to end that epilogue with him as well. And it's done now. Now, I don't know how you two inferred the ending, because I've read 2 conflicting reports. The first one is that, and just to preface as well, when he says, "I want my mom," it was fucking gut-wrenching. Seriously, like I was like, that was the moment. I was like, because of it, he's a horrible person, but he's just a little boy that was traumatized, who saw his mom, who in the midst of getting attacked, give him 10 seconds to make a decision that would change the course of his life, and ultimately one that in the moment saved him and yet damned him. Now that's horrifying for an 8-year-old to have to go through, more so for an adult. And I think the fact that Spike has probably seemingly gone through that and has got other people near him, better people, we don't know. I think it's just so traumatizing, interesting as a character trait for Jimmy Crystal, and how he says that upside down, crucified. And he was upside down in the thing with the crucifixion below him in the church. A young boy who made all the wrong decisions, all the wrong choices chosen for him. Horrifying. But that's done now. However, there's the idea that the jump scare, isn't there, where we see an infected. Now, does that infer that Jimmy Crystal is now off, or is he hallucinating to the point where, because he saw Samson come back with the horns of the devil? I think they're open ending there. And this is where I go back to the point in my earlier statement at the beginning of this. I think these 2 films are built to be back to back, and that's it. I don't think they ever intended the 3rd film to be greenlit, because I didn't think they'd ever get it financed. So these 2 are built primarily as a function as one. And I think it really works there. I don't mind seeing a 3rd film, but I think this really writes itself together. Because if not, I don't think you would have killed off Jimmy Crystal. That's too weird. It's too wacky. And also with the Christ Satanist figure, if you're going to do it right, you have him resurrected. Now, how you do that, I'm not necessarily too sure, but I just think that it really ends on these 2 perfectly well. That's where I would probably end. I would end that just there. I don't need a 3rd film. I don't. Granted, but then again, why not have Jim? Why not have Jamie in this? I just think that how this has been set up is really odd to me, because it feels like this is part 1 and part 2 of one screenplay, and then they've split it up, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. I still try to get my head around the choices of narrative of not having at least Jamie in here as a 3rd party, at least having, do you know, like, I don't know how you 2 feel about that, because I'm quite a big fan of this series, but I don't know how you 2 feel about how that connects, or these being 2 parts and the 3rd part. We're gonna have to have a time jump, because Alfie Williams has aged like 3 fucking years now. How do you explain that? I just think it's quite bad planning, although the financial restraints are accordingly so.
I assume they have a plan. I mean, I think it's hard to speak on, because I just don't know what the 3rd film genuinely is going to be.
I think they do,
Boyle feels very well. I think Boyle feels strongly, though, because I mean, he's at CinemaCon, literally on stage begging people to finance the film. I think he has some inspiration there, right? Like, he has some idea that he feels, I think, strongly about. I have a little conspiracy theory, and I have no idea if this is true or not. This is completely just up to me. But I know they had very, very early screenings of this in early December, and then right before they announced the 3rd one was greenlit. So it seems like those reactions is what got the film greenlit. I kind of feel like if the reactions were bad, they would have cut the gym scene and just ended it there. I think that was tacked on not filmed obviously last minute, but I think that was tacked on last minute to build to the 3rd one. I have a feeling that there was originally an ending to this. that was planned. If they were not going to make sure the third one, that wouldn't have had that, because it just feels very. I mean, I agree with you. I think it ends the story fine, but I know at least the reception from my crowd, there was a lot of anger around like, oh my god, I cannot believe they did this, and we have to go see the third one now. Like, I can't believe they ended this on a cliffhanger like that. I don't know. That's at least how I read it. It feels very, for me, out of place, but also feels like it was like, yes, it builds that these two characters are going to meet. It doesn't really build anything else. It doesn't build a question, or it doesn't build a villain, or it doesn't build a plot line. And when you look at what the world has open-ended right now, that you would go for a sequel, there's the baby, I guess. There's Samson, if you really need more of that. That's about it they've built. So I agree with you that it feels like two films. It's hard to judge a third without knowing the plan, but I would say, just looking at it naturally, I'm not seeing it tremendously being exciting.
I think the best part of these films is that we don't get to know the first 28 days of that virus. That's it. That's not atypical. That's counter programming. We see the aftermath of it. We don't get in the foray of it, which any other film would do. 28 years is a prime. This trilogy is a prime example of going against type, in showing that a little boy from Newcastle, not from London, and seeing a man who's sort of crazed, is trying to cure the infected. A white old man who works for the NHS, trying to cure someone who's not the same colour as him. These are not coincidences. These are deliberate choices to show that young boys, especially with what's happening now in the modern day, become very, 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 very disturbing people if they're not put on the right track. There are very much comments about how to do, about what's happening here, what's happening there. That even that time stopped in 2002, the humanity is rhyme and reason constantly about projecting insecurities, projecting ideas. I think that's all well and good here, but there's also a level of lack thereof comment directly about it. At the beginning, when Jamie and Spike with the slow-mos, and one little girl runs off, like, are they mating? The baby, is that Samson's? Probably not, but the placenta, the world of that, we don't need to know. There's like this a really strange idea that we need to know everything. I don't think we do, but there's certain other things where I think it gets wrong. So the idea that the baby, where the isle is, where it goes back to the Holy Island, if that's delivered, and then, then that's really interesting. That's a little you need to know about placenta. That I have no issue with that. But then when you put it in the Holy Island, that causes greater questions. And then there's other things with the likes of the slow-mos and stuff like that. Like, if you don't, are they mating or stuff like that? I don't need to know specifics. I don't need to know dynamics of that. But there's certain things of, like, Jimmy Inc. How she starts this film to how she ends it. That's an art that doesn't make any sense to that. Where's the disillusionment there? Like, there's questionings of that. Like, and the big thing here, and you talk about conspiracy theories. There's major bids and bets that Kelly, Jimmy Inc., is Jim's daughter. Now, it's interesting because she's got really red hair, really curly hair. Selena does as well. And then when you look at Jim's house, there's bunk beds, 2 kids. Jim's daughter doesn't have an Irish accent. Now, she's lived there for however, she's in secondary school. She's just 13, 14. Now, if you're 14 and live with your dad who's Irish, you're not going to have a Manchester accent. There's loads of interesting implications there, but it's very minute. You don't need to go too deep into it if that's it. But the fact that this film breadcrumbs it, I just led to believe that it's going to be there's going to be a further story. I mean, it writes itself in the third film. I mean, who's going to be the antagonist? Like, you've already maximised the fact that humanity is the biggest antagonistic. The infected aren't. In this film, they're just cleared away like nothing, aside from the scene in the pregnant woman. But even the pregnant woman, I think that's a great scene of the naivety of a young man thinking, like, you not think that your shit stinks? Do you not think that trying to say, please take me with you because you're gonna save her? Do you think that she's that naive? I think those things are really, really pinnacle to this series about people like being so ignorant and naive, thinking that small actions can just absolve the sins. And I think Jimmy Inc. has got so much to speak for. And again, if we're going to the sins of the family losing Spike and gaining Isla, is that really going to be an hour and a half of an interesting feature? I don't know. I don't know where the third film goes. I don't know. I disagree with you to a certain extent. I think the Jim Code has always been planned because they've had to sell this. Because if you're not going to get the third film greenlit and only the second, they've got to fill this up with a bit more noise, and you've got to have it with star power. The fact that Aaron Taylor Johnson's not in here as well. I mean, I just would have just add him into a third party. Add him in throughout all this shit because you easily could do with a few of the Islanders. Get them all home, and then Erin Kellyman, who plays Jimmy Inc. finds Jim, and that's his daughter. Like, that's it. I just don't know where the third one goes here. And to be fair, I'm not really that interested. Believe it or not, I was so hyped to see this, and I liked it. I love the 20 years later. But I feel like it's definitely run its course already. I don't want the answers anymore. I don't need the answers. We don't need to know specifics anymore. I think the ambiguity of it works quite well. I don't know how you two feel. I mean, it seems to be green lit. I mean, they're not going to be able to shoot it anytime soon. But
it's being made. Like it's happening for sure.
I just don't. Who's your antagonist there? I mean, I think everything's been diluted now. So is it going to be the human element? We've done that. We did it quite well. I don't know. I don't know how your two opinions are. But I just if you dilute the human element through the infected element through the two films, highlighted the issues of man and mankind. That's come full circle now. Where can the third one lead to aside from instigation of tribal warfare? I mean, I don't know. I'm not. I don't have the same answers as I did. When I watched the first film, when I watched years later, I did like a 5 things I thought were really interesting about it, and 3 of them haven't been answered. And you know, in this film, I'm not really. I'm not really interested in a third film. I don't not because I'm like miserable or anything like that. I feel like this really works as its own little tragic story that 2 people who are lost are going to be found by someone who's going to do something at least good with them. I don't know how you two feel about a third film. I don't know. I know you're pumped.
Hillary, how do you feel?
I'm on the fence about it. One of the notes I wrote down is I felt like this film was a respite between stations. So in my mind, I really thought there's going to be a third one. But the fact that they removed 2 major players from the board at the end of this film, you have Jack O'Connell dead, supposedly. He might come back, but if he came back, it'd be so unrealistic and weird at this
Agreed.
point. I'm not really interested. And then Ray Fiennes, I feel like Ray Fiennes' character could have gone on. I don't think he needed to be killed off, but that's the decision they made. So that's kind of done and done. The other disturbing element to it is because of the theatrics he pulled off and the way that things are left is that whoever comes across his work is just going to think it's like some weird satanic thing. It's just going to be like this upside down cross with possibly a corpse on it, and then just all of these bones around it. People are going to completely misinterpret what he was doing all those years. So there's the element, like you said, like there's the element with the baby. There's unresolved stuff with Samson. There's Spike and Jimmy Inc., like you said, but what happened with Spike over the past film doesn't make him a very interesting character. I don't find Jimmy Inc. to be redeemable either. I agree with you about that. That's someone who I think is way too far gone. So I don't know what the third film is going to be about. And I feel a lot about the third film the same way I felt about this film, 6 months ago, which is, okay, like, let's see what they do, but I'm not terribly excited about it.
Do you know, Hillary, you mentioned there about Jimmy Crystal. I swear to God that the fact that they don't show him being devoured is just a slight slither that if it worked, that character, they'll bring him back for the third. To me, I just think that just shows such a lack of foresight. This world is quite big, and yet in the same token, it's really quite small. If they've done that to maximise the possibility of him coming back from round 3, I'd be really disappointed because, that's done now. Yeah, they've got to learn this franchise that you don't have to keep on bringing people back. There's so much unlimited possibility. It's like the issue with Jim here. Like that arc finished in 28 years later. You know, you don't have to bring him back. The fact that they do here to bring it full circle works as a 4-piece. I can come to terms with that. But these studios, they've got to learn to leave these things alone now. If you're going to make these franchise, have it about Jamie. That was so interesting with Isla. That's what worked because it's such interesting writing. The reason why Ian Kelson works because it's such an interesting write. It's because he's not come back for 25 years later. I'm not really interested about seeing how someone ages in 34, 45 years in the space of 2 films. I think I want to be in the there and now, and I think this is what's really interesting about this feature is seeing how about when Alpha William Spike is talking to Eric about what an iPhone is, and then the purity of the apples. The apples mean more to Spike than the iPhone does to Eric. That tells you 2 things about a society difference, about how being brought up. There's some simplistic stuff, but has major ramifications of how they see the world and what means the most to them. You know, it's interesting to be with these characters here and now. The fact that we have to go back and go to legacy characters, I think is just such an indictment of where we are in this industry. I would just leave it alone now. I think if they bring Naomi Harris back as Selena, does that do anything? Does that do anything for a 3rd film? Do I want to see it? Yeah, it'd be fun to see Naomi Harris. She's an excellent actress. She's great as Selena, but she was terrific. Then there's no need to go back there. I don't think there's enough legs there. What's to say there's enough legs in Jim now for a 3rd film? He's going to be a major player. Why? Why when you've got Jamie there who's lost his son, now dealing with a daughter from they don't know fucking where, and then all of a sudden the alpha in the area is now dissipated, and what that means for the infected we don't know. If that's your narrative, that's fair enough. But why bring what's Jim's arc there? Do you understand what I mean? I just think it's just if the fact they killed Jimmy Crystal off, or allegedly, they'll bring him back because the hysteria online is like nothing I've seen before. It's like I don't know how I compare it to any sort of villain before. Like it's crazy. Like how's that? Like you see it everywhere. It's good fun. It's really good for the genre, and it's good for Jack O'Connell. But kill the fucker off. Get some finality to it. It makes that character stronger. It really does, because you'll just dilute it. That's my worry about this now.
I agree. I don't think they're going to bring him back, though. I mean, like, with the jump scare, especially how that scene ends, that feels like you would have to write that so, like, heavily to explain to audiences, like, how he survived that and how he got out, or if it's a vision to explain that. I don't see them bringing him back. I hope not.
I mean, he's also bleeding to death as well.
Yeah,
allegedly, but he's
also like full on crucified. Like,
yeah, you suffocate. I think that's the suffocation that kills you eventually. Your lungs fill up with fluid, and that's what kills you when you're crucified like that. Although he's upside down, so I don't know. I don't know enough about torture.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be speculating.
That's a late night Google for you there, Hillary.
Jakob's not here to let us know. No.
Yeah, maybe he would. I don't know.
No, but I mean, I overall agree with you, Jack. I don't think there's much here that I need, because even like stuff like the baby, for example, yes, it's open-ended, but like you've engaged with it enough to where I think the substance has been determined. Like I understand, I think the range of substance you're going to get out of the baby, or the range of substance you're going to get out of Samson, for example. There's not a lot open-ended here where truly it feels so unexplored in the way the Jimmies did in the first film, where it was like, oh wow, you're introducing this new element, is exciting. I don't know where this is going. I feel like I kind of know with every element introduced so far where it's going. So I don't know. I guess maybe I just wish Spike was more interesting. I agree with you, Hillary. They really just reduced him down to be just like a kid, which is funny because he is a kid. But like, I think a lot of that first one was kind of establishing him having to grow up earlier, and having to be more someone of like weight and substance. And then this film just kind of gets rid of that. So I don't know. I guess maybe it's just also that's part of it. Yeah. I have faith. Danny Boyle's someone who, like, I'm not gonna, say he can't do it, but I'm certainly not seeing the vision as of now.
Can I end on something quite positive though? Because I feel like I've been somewhat negative. There was one major thing I was worried about. I think I actually mentioned this when we did the part 1 of this. I was slightly worried, and this is going to sound so quite awkward for me. I was quite concerned that Nia DaCosta, an American, Because if you were going to go do a major city like London, I don't think there's like a major ramification with that. But I was really interested of how Nia DaCosta would shoot like flush or plush greenery or very not suburban areas like Candyman was, like for example, and not like major green screen like it's like that piece of shit the Marvels, which is not her fault. It just is what it is. But I just found I was really interested how she would capture the UK, the Britishness about it. And I think Danny Boyle caught this like really weird aspect of beauty and strangeness, and yet I think Nia DaCosta here does a really good job of just capturing evil. I think there's really great imagery here. I think there's really great sequences behind the camera. I think she did a fabulous job. I haven't seen Hedda. I haven't seen her debut film either. And I know that the Candyman's a bit hit and miss, and the Marvels have just made my mention of it. But she's had a bit of a rocky road at the moment. I think a lot of it going into this was like, oh, how's she going to do this? How's she going to cope? I think she did extremely well here. To say that she's come into a second feature, one that's aesthetically completely totally different to the first one, and she made it her own, and she stamped her authority by saying, I'm not making a Danny Boyle film, I just want to get out the way first and foremost. More power to her. I think she does a really good job here as well. Terrific. You wouldn't know that there's an American behind the camera, and I don't mean that to be naive or ignorant. I don't appreciate what I'm saying here, but this franchise is such like a British ism towards it. It's innate in language and its aesthetic and its opinions and its thoughts and feelings are very British. And I think it's so interesting when an American comes over and sees that type of view and how they sort of connect to it. And yet all you hear is like such great feedback. I'm just going to say this. I really like Danny Boyle's aesthetic and I like Young Fathers. If Nia DaCosta made a third film, I'd be interested. However, I would leave that alone. I think she can showcase, she can work within an environment where someone is not over her shoulder looking in, telling her, maybe do this, maybe alter this in Candyman, and having someone dictate in the Marvels. And when she's left alone to really sort of observe and create, I think she's really talented. I think Hedda's got really good reviews as well. I'm gonna have to go watch that. But this is just totally put her back on the map, and I hope this opens a lot more doors for her. But this proves one thing, you know, when you don't have when you don't have a creative director at the top of your head screaming at your toe, telling you what to do and how to work in a certain vision, you can still work within a freedom, within a cage environment. You know, she can't go off the rails here. She's still got to maintain a lineage, a bloodline through the features, and I think she can showcase, she can play a ball, and also have her own idiosyncrasies here. I think she's fabulous, and if anything comes across as much as Jack O'Connell been a success here, I think she's really, really on parallel level with him here. I think she's fabulous how she's done this film. She doesn't take any ego here. There's nothing here where it's like, oh, that's Nia DaCosta taking over. She looks at the material, she delivers, and she does an excellent job of it. Terrific.
Hey, I'm a Nia DaCosta fan. I loved Candyman. I loved Hedda. Haven't seen her original, but I've heard it's incredible, her debut feature. So
I did. I saw it.
Love. Did you like it?
I did. Yeah, it's Little Woods, right?
Yeah, Little
That's
Woods.
it. Yeah.
I saw that one. It's one of those, kind of like smaller neo-noir films. Like, and I guess that says a lot about me. Like, that's the one I saw. I haven't seen The Marbles or anything like that.
I didn't mention that one for a reason, to be clear.
Yeah.
But
I mean, she's made 5 films in 8 years.
Yeah.
Is that right? Oh, she's like firing these features out.
She's been busy.
Yeah, and all more power to her, because I think once you rest there, if you have like a bad issue with a film and you wait 3 years, I think people get itchy feet. The fact that she just loves the platform, you know, I'd love it to, I think I would love her to maintain in the horror environment. I think the issue that she'll have now is that the success that she's gained with this is I just don't want, and as well as doing Candyman, there's going to be this interesting, the word horror and the word, horror director will begin to follow her. So if what she'll probably do is she'll probably go against type, make something totally different. I hope she does. I think she's a really interesting director. I just hope she doesn't fall back into the idea of, oh, let's go make something else. Make something long form. Go work with Apple TV. They've got some freedom there at least. avoid Netflix. My opinion would have been avoid anything to do with Disney. But here, I mean, really really good. And I think the aesthetic choice to make this more, again, like I said before, about this is not a childlike vision now. This is people, boots on the ground, blood's being shed. You know, that idea of running off into the woods with your fish and your bow and arrow, and you get saved, and these people are here to save you. This is not a nice world. You know, I think how she delivers that and achieves that aesthetic to bring some morality to proceedings is a really great, inspiring idea. Although I think she would have been elevated with the music of Young Fathers, but
It looks like she is doing next a Hulu series an adaptation of Southern Bastards. I don't know what it's a comic book series. I know nothing about it, but
is Hulu a subsidiary of Disney?
yes.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, they do get bundled together as far as streaming goes, but
But you know what? I don't think Hulu has all bad stuff. I don't think it's
No,
it's not the Marvels. You know, I we'll see.
maybe the devil. You know, I don't. Well, tongue in cheek there, I suppose.
I will say I did enjoy her visuals a lot more than the first one. The first one was kind of choppy. It would it'd be very very shaky one sequence and then calmer the next. The visuals were a lot more consistent, and she was not afraid to keep things simple and take her time. So I appreciated that.
Agreed. I think she did a really wonderful job. Moving into wrap up, is there anything left with the Bone Temple that we want to get into from either Jak or Hillary?
Not really. I think I'm
No.
spent.
I think there's just little things. One thing I will point out is that I liked about Kelson is that he does get them high before before he presents himself as saved. I wrote down, I'm like, okay, that is genius, because it's that's exactly what these people need, is to be a little bit altered to believe things. But then suddenly they're not high, and then everything goes wrong. So you take what you can, and then it's one step forward, two steps back. But yeah, I think that's the only thing I have written down that caught my attention at this point.
Jak, you were going to say something?
No, I think that's probably it. I think that's it. I think the more I think about the film, I think the more it's just a classic podcast scenario where the more you talk about it, the more your opinion changes, and I don't think that's going to be for the better. But I just ask you two, you two a bit more. I think we're probably all on the same page actually. But I was just wondering. I haven't read your reviews, but if I had to guess, are you both solid 3 stars on this then? If you're going to out of 5, what are we looking at here then for you two? Because I feel like we're all on the same path here, but I'm struggling here about on a 3 or a 4. But I'm more looking at a 3. I think it's I can't elevate it to be on a 4-star. But I'm just wondering how you two would do it.
Well, I've seen Carson's review. I won't speak for him, but mine was 3.5. But I think it's very much because the movie, in my opinion, is being carried on Ralph Fiennes' back. There's just a lot that he's bringing. His half of the story is very compelling to me.
Yeah.
And I will give them points. You did talk about how we felt about the endings. One thing I can't say it kept me up at night, or I really, really worried about it before going in, but I did think there was a possibility that they might bring Jim in at the end, but Jim would be broken down or corrupted, or things didn't work out for him. And the fact that they showed him exactly as he was at the end of 28 Days Later, that he is someone who still is consistent and good, like you said, that's what I wanted. So I was happy with that.
I agree. I remember there was a lot of discussion about would he be connected to the Jimmies after the first film, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
I agree.
That would have been horrible.
The path they took with him was the right choice. To answer your question, Jak, I'm with Hillary. I was at a 3.5 because we do 0.5s. I think out of a 3 or 4, if I didn't do 0.5s, I think I'd probably lean a 4. I think in the vacuum of this film, outside of concerns about the sequel or concerns about how this ties into this first film just as a vacuum, I think it's an experience that worked for me a lot more than it didn't work for me. I think both sides of the film, yes, I agree, the tenderness and that story touched me a lot more than the Jimmy story, but I still think it was rewarding for what it was. So I'd lean a 4 more than a 3, but I went 3.5.
Did this film change your opinion of the predecessor, either of you two then?
No, not really.
No.
Really?
No.
I think I love the first film more now.
I think I like it less, as
I
strange that
agree.
is. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
I know,
Okay.
isn't that wild?
Because the
I
first one was so much built, like so much of the film. For how I see the first one is like the promise of what is to come, and while I think I like what this film delivers, I don't think I like it in terms of how it was set up in the first film as much.
I think it's just it's like my dour European sensibilities, which is very much like I just want the Ray Fiennes cut. I just want the lonely man in the
Yeah,
middle of nowhere in his bone temple, like trying
I
to do the
agree
right
with you
thing, and
there.
everything else could fuck off. But that's
No, I
me.
that's fair.
no, I completely agree with you there. I think that is that there must have been a chat like about that would have been so against type, and that would feel like part two, like more like 1.5, almost. Like you don't have to make like a direct sequel, but you can still then go on.
Yeah.
Hillary, there's something there. I think I think that's the better film. I must admit, but I'd be oh my god, I could watch 3 hours of that. I'd love to see that. Just can you imagine if we didn't have to do the whole dose and it was like we'll have to do this, you know, intermittently. The film
Hmm.
there would be so interesting. You'd see more of the
Yeah,
Jimmies as well, back and forth. I mean, you know, add 10 more minutes on, and no one would be complaining.
I
Yeah,
agree.
but yeah, that's. I mean, like I said, that's me though, and I know that my opinion very much does not fall into the popular opinion. So take that with a grain of salt.
I'm so sad they killed him. Like
I
to me, when I
know,
look
I
at number
hated it.
three, genuinely, that's the biggest thing that makes me like, oh, that makes me sad. I just want like at least another, 40 minutes with him or whatever half the
Yeah, he has
film would
so
be
much
like.
information. Like Samson
He's
can't
Yeah,
speak, so like how is he going to be able to communicate anything unless he becomes completely articulate again? I don't know. It's a shame that he got killed in such a lame way too, where it's like,
yeah.
oh really?
It's not
Okay.
even like the death you focus on in that scene. Like it really is like the second billing to Jimmy dying, which is sad. And I also love to see like now that he knows this worked, like what does he do next? Like that is far more with that character and how his mind is. That's far more engaging to me than anything presented. But
Hmm. Yep.
maybe we could can we retcon it to where he's alive? How do we get that, guys? Come on.
Yeah, he comes back and he's like, I'm no longer an atheist. There's something out there, but that would just be terrible. I mean, it'd be interesting to see Kelson and Jim interact because it seems like they definitely come from like the same
Yeah.
mindset, and it would have been interesting to have dialogue between. Well, just Killian Murphy and Ray Fiennes. I mean,
Do you
that
know
would have
that
been interesting.
there is a way to save him, and the fact that if he gets infected, and yet he can restrain from the same strain as he can be restrained from the same strain as of infection that Samson has, and he can go back and he can do his own experiments. But that's like Carson said, you've got to write like fan fiction at that point. Let it be gone.
Hmm.
Like the fact that he takes him off into the woods is like why he would do that. I don't know because the
Yeah, I
Bone
don't know
Temple is
either.
yeah that's where he belongs. So that it's just like just a means to get away from those characters. It just I don't know.
Well, I think on that note,
Yeah, none of us
that's
are happy now.
yeah, we
So,
we ended really positively and then we just went back down, but that's okay.
Hmm.
That's gonna do it for our review of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. If you want to see the film, go see it in theaters. I definitely recommend this on the big screen. Don't wait for streaming or video on demand. See films on the big screen. With that, let's go to our question of the week. We all loved Ralph Fiennes in this film. We all were big fans. Let's discuss for our question of the week. What is your favorite performance of his? Hillary, I would love if you would start us off. What is your pick?
Well, I mean, this was a very interesting question because I realized, oh, yes, he's an amazing actor. And I've just been taking him for granted for all of these years, like pretty much my entire life. So it was a difficult question to answer. And I happened to be with some friends last night after I saw the film. And I brought up this question that you posed to us. And all of us just sat there and realized, oh, yeah, he's been in everything. And he's so consistently good. And he's so good in this. And he's so good in that. You can't say anything, I don't think there's a film that stands out where it's like, oh yeah, he really bungled that one. But as lame as the answer might seem to you guys, I think that this is the most fascinating character he's played. I think Dr. Ian Kelson is probably my favorite character of his. Very fascinating, a lot of depth. And absence of backstory, but you can kind of fill in little things about there about who he may have been before things went wrong, what his interests were. There's pictures on the wall in his little bunker that kind of give you an indication of the people in his life or who he might have been before everything went wrong. So for me, it's this guy, but of course not to overshadow everything else he's done. He's good in everything, but I think personally for me, this is my favorite thing he has been in.
I think that's a great answer. Whenever we ask a question like this, and then I watch the film and I'm like, oh, this is kind of like a really good answer for the question, I'm always like, oh, it's, okay, I guess like you could just say the film we talked about for 2 hours, but like you really couldn't argue, I think that. Jack, what are your picks?
So I think there's one definitive answer, and that's obviously Schindler's List.
Oh yeah.
I went to go when I was in Chicago. I watched at the Dolby Atmos theater, and there's just like the film's hard enough, but he is horrifying in that film, truly horrifying. It like there's this vision of evil, but I can't. I don't want to say that because it's not really interesting. Because I think that's the obvious point. I'll say something to echo Hillary. I remember in 2005 going to the cinema and seeing Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and not reading the books, having no idea, and those last 10 minutes where Voldemort comes back on screen, and that ultimately that villain defined part of my childhood for the longest time. Voldemort. I remember watching each one in the cinema until when I was about 15, when I finished school and I went with two of my friends to go watch it, to Devil Hallows Part 2, and like this massive build up, like this villainous character who was in these books, and he was always description. It wasn't ever brought on screen, and there was so many depictions of him in the Philosopher's Stone, and then then he just went missing, and then Goblet of Fire. This character just came to life, and I think Voldemort probably will be one of those characters where I think it's defining for an age, and I don't think it will ever be done as good, and just in the fact that it was brought to life and it got it right the first time. I think whoever plays him in this HBO series, I think is going to have a very difficult thing ahead of him for multiple reasons, I'm sure. But yeah, I think him as Voldemort is terrific. But he's an actor who's got a terrific amount of versatility. I mean, his voice acting in Wallace and Gromit and The Curse of the Were-Rabbit's terrific. He's like work with Wes Anderson, The Constant Gardener, Coriolanus. Like he's got like some really good work. And his theatrical background. I mean, he can do big budget. He can do independent. He's terrific in Bruges. He plays M in Bond.
Yeah, that's right.
He's an actor who's
it just becomes a list of just like, oh, remember him at that? He was good in that's what our conversation became. And but it was interesting because there is like that generational divide. Like immediately people say Voldemort. And then I was sitting there and I was saying like, but do you guys remember him in The English Patient and Wuthering Heights and stuff like that? And they're just like, oh, fuck yeah. And I'm like, Wuthering Heights was his second movie. Like that blew my mind. He just went out the gates running, and he was a lead and he never stopped. It's crazy.
A terrific actor, terrific, phenomenal.
Yeah. No one mentioned Doolittle, but that's okay. I'd also throw out there The Menu. He's great in.
Oh yes.
In Bruges, I was going to mention fantastic. I'm going to go a Bigger Splash though. I mean, not just Big Guadagnino stand, but he's great in that movie. We had a whole podcast, a really good podcast on that, so I'd check it out. But no, genuinely a phenomenal filmography, and I'm happy that he's kind of getting a moment here because you go through, and again, it's an actor. Hillary, I'm right there with you. Or he's great in Conclave also, I should mention, but I'm right there with you where like don't necessarily think of him when I just think of like the great actors working today, but like no, he really is fantastic. I would love to hear at you at home your thoughts. Email or respond on Twitter or at us or whatever you want to do. With that, let's end this by getting to our rapid reviews. I will go very quickly. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't discussed already. I watched Ridley Scott's Legend for the first time this week, getting ready for the Uncut Gems podcast. You can get our full discussion there. Very fascinating film. I think if you are like a Ridley Scott fan and you've not seen this, you will never prepare yourself for what this is. Really, really, really great production design and visual language. Not so sure on the story, but you can listen to the podcast for that. This week I watched 1 Hour Photo for the first time.
Oh wow.
Masterful. Literally instant 5 stars. I know Robin Williams' performance, and for good measure, gets a ton of attention here. But the screenplay is so good. This is a film that's not only incredibly clean, but it never has to tell the audience anything. Instead, it shows the audience through really, really inspired imagery, just everything that you need to understand about this character, about his wickedness, about his emotions, what made him this way, why he's this way. It's masterfully done. I cannot recommend that film enough. And then finally, a new film. If you watched this and you were like, this is kind of depressing and I want to see London look nice, Wild London, I believe this is for the BBC, the new David Attenborough
Oh
documentary. It talks
wow!
about nature in London. Loved it. I thought it was so joyful. Every David Attenborough film. He's like 100. He's gonna turn 100 this year, I believe. It's such a joy that we get to see him still walking around London, talking about birds, looking at hedgehogs in his yard. Because there's going to be a day very shortly where that doesn't happen. As someone who grew up on nature documentaries, he is such a pivotal figure in my life and in my discovery of my passions. And I just think it's really lovely that, like, in 2026, we still have new films coming out, and I'm really joyful for that. So that's what I watched this week. Jack, what have you seen recently?
Right, so while I've been away at Christmas and New Year, I've been at a farm that has had no internet access. So aside from pre-fucking logged stuff on Netflix, which my family's like American, so they came with the Roku. Thank God, Madeline. She came in with the Roku. So I watched the whole entirety of season. Is it season 5 of Stranger Things? I thought it was like fine. I just thought it was
Oh
really,
no.
again, yeah, really anticlimactic towards its end. And I thought the finale, when it had 45 minutes left, I sort of gasped. I thought, well, what? I watched the entirety of Peaky Blinders and then got drunk and shaved all the sides and back of my head. um,
Oh my god.
yeah, I had like 7 or 8 pints of Guinness and just thought I need to do it. And I remember ringing my wife. I was like, I'm going to shave my head. And she's like, don't you dare. At least leave a lot on top. And I'm really happy with the result. And that's not because I'm not video recording it. You would have seen that tonight if I wasn't in bed. So next recording, I'll show you it. What else have I seen? I'm still logging my Hooptober stuff because I'm just so far behind with work. But I have seen some new releases, Carson. So if you want to bear with me, I'll tell you because they ain't good. Let's start with the running man, Edgar Wright, Dyer. What
Oh
should
boy.
what should have been an absolute home run? How they managed to fuck that up is unbelievable. No heart, no soul, boring. Glenn Powell's comatose throughout. Really tough to watch. Just not fun whatsoever. Woman in the Yard. I watched the Hooptober as well. These are just new films that you can find most of them on my letterbox, which I'll mention a bit later. Also, Dyer. The first 10 minutes of it interesting. Everything else is just prolonged the inevitable. Really dull. I watched The Accountant 2. Really liked it. I thought John Bernthal and Ben Affleck have a really good chemistry. Ben Affleck, his range, I think is superb. I know there's a little bit of about showcasing autism on screen as an actor who hasn't got it. I know there's a conversation to be had there, and I'm also very iffy about it. However, I think there's a great emotive power about bringing that to screen in a certain way. But I can understand why that would be quite difficult for a lot of other people. Wake Up Dead Man, I thought was really dull. I just find that so tedious. Ryan Johnson to watch. I mean, Josh O'Connor in there. I mean, fair enough to him. I think he carries the film. Everything else is just so dull. There's one sequence in there where someone rings him up, and he talks to them, and the film, the character, everything wants to run away from it, and Ryan Johnson makes the audience and the priest stay with it, and ultimately take somewhat like of a confession on the phone. I thought it was so well done. It was a diamond in a patch of shit. Frankenstein, Guillermo del Toro. I liked it. I don't know why people are hating on it. I think Jacob. It's a classic Del Toro twist on what everything would be. So everything is like Del Toro. So the Frankenstein design, it's just I had to just sort of let that go very early. But I think Jacob Elordi is going to be like becoming quite quickly something so interesting to watch. I may even sit through Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights just to be able to see him act. I think he's a really fabulous actor. Everything else there is just like there's a lot to diagnose with that film. I wish I would have done a ClapperCast with you on it, Carson. I should have watched it earlier because I find my thoughts on that one moment straying from like I quite liked it to then being like, what's the point? Because his idea was to do 3 films and show 3 different sides to that. But yet you watch the first film with the captain in the Arctic, and that ends in 25 minutes. So I don't quite understand how that then leads up to it. But fair enough, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Y2K, horrifying. First 20 minutes good, everything else dire. Hell of a summer, Finn Wolfhard, stop right now. Child, stop right now. Go back to school. Go learn the craft, you ignorant bastard. It was horrible film. Horrible. Totally. Everything about that is just dire. So immature. So naive that anyone can just pick up a camera and make a film. It's all like anatomically incorrect. Dire. Go back. Eddington, Carson's favourite, Ari Aster. Carson loves Beau is Afraid, everyone out there. Just to mention that. He says he doesn't like it, but I've seen the post in the back room signed by Ari Aster himself.
He is vigorously shaking his head.
No, he's
That's why the video's off, so you can't see the posters I forgot to take down. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Eddington adored it. Loved it.
Just shut up eventually. What are you talking about? Stop.
Honestly, there's just something about I'm just enamored with this world. This is so horrifying.
It's probably because we're American and he's in the UK. Like,
yes,
this to us is not funny.
That's
probably what it is.
No, but he did the same thing with Beau's Afraid, where he was like, "It's 5 stars. It's so good. Stop. Just
it's so
let it go,
good,
buddy."
Carson. That opening's so good. But
I wouldn't come to the island and help you if the zombie apocalypse broke out.
But Eddington, like, I think you're right, Hillary. I think it's someone who's not from the USA, although I've lived there a little bit and I've visited multiple times. Obviously, I've got family there. I do find it so interesting to watch that, because when that happening in my world, it was in my front room. So the fact that stuff was happening like that with the riots and certain things, I find so interesting about the human condition there. But just turned up to 11, and the finale to it I thought was terrific. Just finishing up here, there's 2 more films. I'm going to do Cuckoo. I thought was terrible. I just think, again, a film that just slowly just points to the inevitable. It's so cold, so dull, so boring. The one I wanted to leave to last, because I know Carson's got some skin in the game here. I did watch Shelby Oaks. Right, this is an interesting one. If you could ever see a film that the 1.5 million reshoots were in it, it's in that. I think it's a tale of 2 halves. I think there's a creative there who loves movies, and you can tell Chris Stuckman loves movies. Blair Witch is in here. Hereditary is in here. The Ritual is in here. Amityville Horror is in here. All his favourite richness of horror. The problem being an admirer of horror and a lover of cinema is that none of it becomes original. And I think that this film should have cut off 5 minutes before the end. And I think he's just trying to indulge on all of his passions and love. And by the end of it, I don't think Chris Stuckman is there with that film. I think it's everyone else. And that's the shame with the debut. And I know we've mentioned this multiple times with other debut films and having to make it flash and having to absorb an audience. This is a film where I look at it and I don't see the director putting his voice and his vision and his love of what he wants to do on screen, and aside from an amalgamation of things that have come before it that he adores. And I think it's a very tricky place to be, to not honour and not even homage, but find the discrepancies between doing that and putting your own vision up there. And I think he gets lost in between the two. Although, and we've mentioned this before, I think on air or off, regardless, I think it's a positive to have. Chris Stuckman, for I know, Carson, you're really fond of him, and rightly so. But Chris Stuckman on multiple times for the last few years, and he's not going to watch this. I'm not really bothered anyway. I'm not doing it for a fucking handout. This is my honest opinion. I think he did a video a few years ago about his sexuality and his journey through his religious journey. And I think through that video, he's probably saved a few kids. And I don't mean that in that, he's gone out there and he's got them from the torturous bounds of the cages that are in I think he's generally probably opened a lot of people's minds in individuals where they're not in an environment where they're prospering, and that they're able to look at someone who's gone out of that in the wilderness, let's say, and prospered. And I think he's probably saved a few people's lives, quite literally on that level. I generally do think he's done that. With this, I think he's proved that you can do anything. I generally do. I think the fact that I was watching him 10 years ago in his room when he was like doing reviews of Inception, and the guy made a film with neon, produced by Mike Flanagan, I think is generally one of the biggest things. And it's not like I have like third party like a third party high about it, but I think it just makes the community all the more proud for it as well. I think it should be such a celebration for him to do that. Even like Nick and Diego as well, to go out and make films and stuff like that. Fair play. It's something I can't do. I couldn't do that. But the fact that that's not stopping to go and make movies and stuff like that, more the power to it. And this just opens up so much more possibilities. I know it didn't do particularly well. I know it didn't do very well in Europe. I think probably flatlined here. I know it didn't do particularly well in the US, but I still think it's a staggering achievement. But that's as much as I watched. So I'm sorry to go on, but I haven't been on in ages, and I didn't have any Wi-Fi over at Christmas, so I just didn't watch much. So it's been quite difficult last 2 weeks. But yeah.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Hillary, what have you seen recently?
Well, I highlighted 3 things, but I wanted to say that I was very amused by Jack's breakdown, because there's just so much disappointment. And I haven't seen all the same films that you've seen, but like The Running Man, it was just such a disappointment.
Oof.
And you know, some other things where it's like, oh, that didn't work out, or I didn't like this so much. And it's like, yeah, you know, disappointment is part of being a film viewer. So the 3 that I wanted to mention, one was Fraud, which is a favorite film of mine. It's directed by Dean Fleischer Camp, and I thought I was never going to be able to own it or be able to see it again. Vinegar Syndrome released it on Blu-ray, so I got it for Christmas. So I was able to see that again. And the weird thing is, I ended up doing some digging around and found out that the father who is filming most of the footage um, and all of that, he's gotten strange over the years. And then I found out that he has a Letterboxd account, and anyone who watches Fraud, he will like your review, and that he tries to talk to you about it, because he wants you to go to his Substack about how he can get EVP on his track phone and like hear messages from aliens. So he does have an account, very fascinating. It just shows like this film, which is really fascinating on its own, like the story around it is getting bigger. The second film I wanted to mention was Seven Samurai, which was assigned through a film club that I'm a part of. And I thought I'd seen this film, and it was just like this huge revelation. I started watching Seven Samurai, and I thought, oh my God, no, I haven't seen this. I must have mixed it up with some other Kurosawa film. So I was able to see that for the first time through Kismet, kind of, and really enjoyed it. A lot to talk about. Great film to just sit down and have a conversation about once it's over. And then the last one I wanted to highlight is very much a me film. It's gonna be some film that I don't think many people have heard of, and that I like, and probably not a lot of people are crazy about. But it's called Fremont. It came out in 2023. It's directed by someone named Babak Jalili. I really hope I pronounced your name correctly. Hopefully, you'll never hear this. He's a Persian director, or it says, I know, an Iranian British American film director. So very interesting background. And it's just about this Afghan refugee who works in a fortune cookie factory, and her loneliness and isolation. If you like early Jarmusch films, and I'm one of those people who really does, this very much feels like an early Jarmusch film. It's in black and white. It's very patient. The soundtrack is very eclectic, and the ending is quite wonderful. If you like The Bear and Jeremy Allen White, he does show up in it, and it's quite a wonderful performance from him. There's a lot of gems in this film, a lot of different character actors being given the opportunity to do very interesting stuff. So I'm going to leave it there. But out of the 3, honestly, like Fraud, not for everybody. Seven Samurai, everyone's seen it, but Fremont is just one of those jewels out there that I think people don't even know it exists, and I actually look forward to seeing it again in the near future.
Well, that's a great pick, Hillary. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today on this podcast. Thank you for listening. Where can we find everyone if we want further words from everyone on social media? Jack?
Or you can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and at Clapper with username at Jak-Luke Sharp.
Hillary?
Sorry, accidentally muted
Oh,
myself.
you're good.
So you can find me either through Letterboxd, through the name Degelle, Degelle, or you can find me through just going into any browser and typing in campsite.bio/Degelle. The link is also my Letterboxd account, and that links to everything else I'm doing on the internet. And you're always welcome to peruse that. Peruse that. Sorry, that cold is it's still really hanging in there. This is like my 8th cough drop, and it's still going.
Oh no. Well, thank you for braving through that with us. You can find me on Twitter at BP_movie reviews, Letterboxd just Carson Timar. Thank you so much, everyone, again for listening. Next week, we're not going to be on the main feed. We're going to be on the Patreon feed as Randy from the Uncut Gems podcast joins to review Sam Raimi's For Love of the Game, a Sam Raimi film I've never seen. Very excited to get into with him. So with that, again, thank you so much for listening and watching. Goodbye.